Committee members Hutchinson, Hintermeister,
Here.
Trash Scarfink,
Here.
Edgerton, Lovelace.
Present.
Okay, and Mr. Edgerton is here. Okay, and so the first item is a report of the chair, and want to introduce Edmund Sullivan. He's our new executive officer, and he was on the phone with us. Were you on the phone? No, at the implementation board. It was someone else then.
Someone else, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And anyway, so if I could give the floor to Mr. Sullivan, and do you like Ed or Edmund?
Either's fine, yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll take turns introducing ourselves as the members talk themselves.
Sure. So just, thank you, Chairman. So just kind of a brief overview of where I came from and work experience.
Yes, sir.
And all that sort of stuff. So originally from upstate New York, moved to California 11 years ago. In New York, I worked for Niagara County Planning, worked in consulting, doing a lot of open space work, stuff related to farmland preservation. As a consultant, I worked on sort of more traditional planning stuff like open space plans and community development and Main Street improvements and all those sort of general plan updates that consultants do. So I moved out here, worked for Placer County for 11 years, worked for the Placer Legacy Open Space Program, worked on their HCP, NCCP, that 10 of those 11 years. Still not permitted like the one here. So my educational background, I went to the University of Wisconsin, and I have a master's in planning and conservation biology. It's a real honor to be here, and really looking forward to working with the PAC to assist with implementing the plan. I think this group here is a key cog in the implementation process. You represent the community, you represent various stakeholder groups, and it's important to get the feedback from both you as general public members and you as representatives of stakeholder groups as sort of a barometer of whether we're accomplishing the objectives of the plan. And getting feedback from this group is critical, I think, to effective implementation of the plan. Thank you.
And then all of us, asked each one of us to tell Ed basically how we view the organization and how we would like it to go forward. And Valerie, could you do more or less the same for us? And she is our new general counsel.
Certainly. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. My name is Valerie Armento. I have spent my entire legal career here in the San Francisco Bay Area as a municipal law attorney. I started out in the city of Fremont, then went to the city of Hayward. I became the city attorney of South San Francisco, and then I spent 14 years as the city attorney of Sunnyvale. I retired from Sunnyvale, and I continue to do various local government types of jobs. I've done some work with the Santa Clara Valley Water District and with the county of Santa Clara, as well as a number of different cities.
And did you also work with John Williams at Sunnyvale, or was he before you?
No, I don't recognize that name. Sorry.
No.
I have both a law degree and a master's of regional planning degree from Cornell University, which I went to from here. And I'm delighted to be in a position where I can actually use those two degrees in my work with the agency.
Well, welcome aboard for both of you. Under the report of the chair, I don't have anything new to report, but I am now a permanent item on the agenda for the Implementation and Governing Board. So if anyone has anything that they want raised at those 2 meetings and you don't want to go, let me know, and I'd be more than happy to accommodate. We had a relatively short meeting 2 weeks ago, and where Valerie was introduced as well. Are you folks okay with Ed and Valerie?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Then if we could start from the right, Julie, if you could a little bit on, give them a thumbnail of who you are and where you see this going.
Okay. Hi, I'm Julie Hutchison. I'm a resident of Morgan Hill, but I'm also environmental advocate for the Committee for Green Foothills. Committee for Green Foothills was a stakeholder in this process from the very beginning. And I took over from Brian Schmidt, who was the original stakeholder for Committee for Green Foothills at the very ending. I welcome you both. It's my understanding from Ken that he's very pleased with the choices that were made. So that's exciting to hear. From my perspective, I guess you're looking for how really the greatest thing I think for us are two of the main issues that come as no surprise. One would be to ensure that the fee structure is holding up what will be the goals for implementation in the long run for acquisition and for species recovery. So those are two of the things we keep our eye on the most. And then from there, I think we'll sort of, I would say that past that, as we sort of from time to time not revise, but review the plan, see where changes may be necessary. That's, I think, also a big one for us. There's always new data that comes up, so it's a good opportunity to tweak the plan where necessary.
Thank you. Jan?
Hi, I'm Jan Hintermeister. I'm on the County Parks Commission, and as a result of that, I was asked to join the stakeholder group really near the start of this whole process. So I've been at almost all the stakeholder group meetings over the last 8 years or however long it's been. And I'm also on a member of the Open Space Authority's Citizen Advisory Council Committee. And as far as what we're doing here, just in general, I expect to, contribute, input as a member of the public. Also, to do things that may be tasked to us, by the governing bodies. But, in terms of my own general look at the Habitat Conservation Plan, the things I'm most concerned about are the burrowing and owl strategy, which is, to me, probably one of the most difficult things and one of the species that's really in the most trouble. So, just in general, to make sure that the conservation measures that are in the plan actually get implemented.
Thank you. Georgia?
I'm Georgia.
This is your first official meeting, although you did sit in the
in,
audience
yeah.
once before.
I'm relatively new to the board, so I can't really say for sure what it's all about. I have my feelings about what I'd like to see. And I believe in preservation, but I also believe that when you're spending taxpayers' dollars, that it should be accessible to the taxpayers. So I'm very interested in that aspect of it.
So preserving access to the properties, is that?
Yeah, having access. I mean, if we're buying up a lot of the land with taxpayer dollars, I think it should be accessible by the taxpayers. There are times, of course, I understand that it's going to be in fragile areas that you cannot allow people on for some reason or another. But I just think that as much access as possible to the taxpayers is good.
Thank you. Greg?
Hi, welcome to both of you. Glad to see we're actually have staff now and up and running. That's a good thing. I started with the Habitat Plan in October of 2005 when Don Gage made an announcement down at Guadalupe Park, and that was a culmination of quite a bit of effort prior to that. My job is I'm the executive director of the Silicon Valley Land Conservancy, and a lot of the initial mitigation, especially for the Bay checker spot butterfly, has gone to our organization. And so the habitat plan will probably either replace or we may be able to fit in there. I'm not exactly sure how. So that's my job, what I do for work. I'm here not representing that organization, but to represent generally the environmental community from whatever standpoint. The one thing that I do want to see, and the reason I bring this up is that I've seen other places where it wasn't, is this body being relatively irrelevant in the process. We don't have any voting authority. We're not elected by the public. We're just kind of here. So I'm going to be keeping a close eye and see if what we say and comments that we have has any impact, or whether it's just like kind of a nice thing to have. So that will be of interest to me. And also keeping an eye out for the operation of the plan from the environmental standpoint. Is it proceeding on target and that type of thing? So that's all.
Thank you. Joe?
Hi, my name is Joe Lovelace. I'm an electrician here in San Jose, and I just graduated from San Jose State back in December with a degree in environmental studies. And I became aware of the plan in 2010, just doing some research, looking for something to do a report on. And as I was reading the plan and attending some meetings, I discovered that there wasn't a lot of public involvement even in the process. There was a lot of stakeholder involvement. But as far as the general public, I saw that there was a sort of an element missing in the process, and I was critical of that in a couple of reports that I wrote, and then I became sort of committed to either becoming involved myself or making sure that there was some accessibility for the general public to this plan and to the process. We're talking about endangered species take and a fairly large preserve, and I wanted to be a part of that, so I put my name in the hat, and here I am. So I look forward to working with you, and I'm happy to be here and working with these people. So thank you. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. About the only thing I can add, and I agree with everything everyone has said, but one thing that Joe has brought up several times, that we are advocates for the environment. We are advocates for the Habitat Agency. And so we're looking for ways that we can become more involved and reach out to groups, community groups, anyone who, that we can go and make sure that our voice is heard. And I do have one question with Georgia, and I'm not certain myself, but are we that much taxpayer funded, or are we developer funded and government?
Well, true enough, yeah.
Right.
It is mostly. But do keep in mind that the people who buy the houses are paying the bill, because it increases the cost of the property. So I just thought that, my understanding was this is an oversight committee. But, well, I think preservation is important. I do think what Joe said was very relevant in that there's not a lot of community involvement. And I think I probably would represent another side of the community that typically doesn't get involved in this, because I'm not an environmentalist, and I love the outdoors. I, conserve myself, but I'm not an environmentalist. But I think the vast majority of people are like me. They're everyday people going to work every day, and they're seeing government agencies that are expanding all the time, and they feel like they should get something from it. But most people are not even aware of what is going on things like this, I don't think.
Well, and we may be the smallest government agency in California with 1.5 employees in a couple of offices that here in Morgan Hill City Hall. Ed, did you want to talk about the developer versus taxpayer?
Sure. It's roughly 70% of the plan is supposed to be funded by fees on public and private projects. So like a public road or bridge project or a canal maintenance or a housing subdivision or a commercial development. And then the other 30% is supposed to come from grants, primarily from the federal and state government, but there may be opportunities through private foundations also.
Thank you. Then we would move on. Oh, one question before we go further on. Jennifer Shear, has she resigned? Is she going to resign?
Officially has resigned, effective August 6th.
Okay. And what would be the process for tapping someone from the farming/ag community?
Valerie's going to go over the process in her presentation.
Okay.
But I contacted Supervisor Wasserman's office. He's the chair of the implementing board, letting him know that Jennifer has resigned and we need someone from the ag community to be, to replace her. And I was at a Farm Bureau event and I mentioned it to the Farm Bureau president, that we need somebody to take Jennifer's place.
And the one member that we don't have here is Dick Oliver, and he is the head man for Dividend Homes, which is responsible in a good way for many of the residences here in Morgan Hill. Then, yeah, go, jump in.
Ed, so at the Farm Bureau, they didn't let you know whether or not they had an executive director in the chute that they would be hiring soon?
They do.
Okay.
I think she started this week or late last week.
All right, so that's a
Yes.
potential replacement.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Is there any requirement for farm representation? Does it have to be a local farmer, someone just interested in farming? Are there any requirements on that?
Yes, there's supposed to be, I think it is 2 representatives from the agriculture community, I believe. Yeah. So
It actually says farming and ranching community, so it's specific of farming and ranching. Doesn't necessarily say the person has to be a farmer, but it says they have to come from the farming and ranching community.
Okay. Are you accepting, because I have a number of people that might be interested that would be, so are you accepting names or are you already
yes.
working with?
No.
Mariani?
Send me, email me some names. I'll pass them on to Supervisor Wasserman's office. Yeah.
Which brings up a note. I went on the website. You don't have an email on the website. There's no way to contact you, and I don't have that.
Oh, it was supposed to be updated, but I can give you a card. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
It is on the website, but I have to admit, I know, it took me a little while to find it, but I did.
Well, I spent about 15 minutes of
I know, no, you had to get lucky like I did, I think, and
Okay.
finally stumble
That might
over
be
it.
one of the things to let it, so we can easily contact both of you. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I would invite everyone to go on to the website, because websites typically are not user-friendly. And I am technology challenged, but if I can't find stuff on a website, then it's unacceptable because I'm Joe Anybody. And so it's and so if you would go on to the website from the new user standpoint, why can't we find your name easily and your contact information?
It's something that I have brought up, that we've gotten some complaints, and I have brought it up to the consultants, ICF, and to the city of Morgan Hill, who manage our webpage jointly. And I brought it to their attention that some things aren't very easy to find, like staff, and told them that it needs to be a little more upfront and center and transparent and easy to find. So it's being worked on, but I apologize that it's still not done. But yes. Yeah, yes, the graphics are good.
And the phone problems have been resolved?
Yes. We have new phones and
they were just switched over a week early or 2 weeks early?
Yes, yeah, and they're actually great phones. The old ones were not so great, but...
Thank you. Then, do any committee members have any announcements coming up?
Sort of just had a question. I don't know if this is the appropriate time for it. I was wondering if, as I hadn't had a time to look at the plan and get this question answered, so PG&E is doing some right-of-way work, some vegetation management along their transmission lines here. Have they contacted you at all on their plans?
No, they
Okay.
haven't. I don't know if they contacted Ken or Tara, but they have not contacted me.
They had a presentation today for some stakeholders, actually at CAL FIRE right down here on Monterey, and they don't plan on having any take. I found that a little interesting because apparently they're going to do such a great job that won't happen. But I was just wondering if at all they had contacted you to get any feedback on some of their plans.
I do know from my experience in Placer County and working in the planning department, they, being a utility, they have a lot of rules and exceptions that the rest of us don't have, so they may not even have to contact me.
I assume they don't have to. I just wondered if they were sort of decently reaching out to.
But they could become a something we call a PSE, a participating special entity. They're not a co-permittee.
Yeah.
But like Caltrans is doing that with some projects. There was Gavilan College. There was some university research thing through Berkeley, and they all paid fees to get plan coverage. So there may be a time where PG&E will need that.
Yeah, that's why I asked them
and
today,
I know
but they
that
didn't
SMUD
indicate
in
it
Sacramento was working on an HCP, so for their activity. So PG&E may have some sort of.
They don't have an HCP here, not in Santa Clara County now.
Okay.
But I was just curious, just a question. Curious.
Yes.
Thank
No,
you.
it's a good question.
Any others? Then, on the PG&E question, if sometime, before the next meeting or whenever you choose to, that we would like to know if this is a program rather than we got a problem with a tree, because a program can very definitely have an impact, and I have dealt with PG&E at many different levels, and sometimes they're responsive and often they're not. Since we do have the weight of many elected officials on the governing and implementation board, the agency does have a big club, although they may not have the ability to use it, but there's a lot of heavyweights out there. Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that the folks at PG&E said they would be specifically reaching out to Supervisor Wasserman's office because they weren't able to attend today's meeting, so they will speak with them.
Good. And then, is there anyone here from the public who has an item that they would like to talk about that is not on the agenda? Gentlemen? Thank you. If I could have a motion to approve the minutes of the May 1 meeting?
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the May meeting.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion or any corrections or questions? And if we could have a vote, yes?
Aye.
I'll have to abstain since I was absent from the last meeting.
Thank you. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4.
I have to abstain also.
So we have 4 yays. Okay. And then the Public Advisory Committee training, is that both of you?
I don't think that's a quorum for the minutes, correct?
Okay, then we will hold off, we will hold it over till the next meeting.
Perfect.
And then if we could, is that Ed or Valerie on the, or both, on the committee training?
So it will be primarily myself. And let me just preface my starting of the training with the fact that it was on the agenda prior to my becoming the general counsel, so I wasn't really sure what all everybody had in mind. When they said that you were going to have a training, I tried to find out, and I put together what I thought would be helpful and appropriate. If you decide at any point you're not interested in a particular topic or you want to know something else, just please let me know.
Thank you.
Right? So, do I operate this or do you operate this? How does this work? I have to operate that? Okay, I got to move. It's all right. It's all right. I'm a little technologically challenged as well. Okay, up or down? Okay, so just some basics about the PAC. Since you're all on it, but as some of you indicated, you're newer than others and so forth and so on. The Habitat Plan actually says that there will be a public advisory committee. So a public advisory committee was formally established. And the Joint Powers Agreement says that the PAC will provide input to the agency regarding the plan implementation, and it requires that the implementation board appoint the members of the PAC. So you're all familiar with having gone through that appointment process. The implementation board formally adopted Resolution 2013-004, and in that resolution they established the PAC, the composition of the PAC, so you all are, either the environmental or general public or whatever your category is. And the resolution specifies that the authority of the PAC is limited to the powers and duties granted by the implementation board, but then goes on to say that the implementation board can change your powers, functions, and duties if it's deemed desirable or consistent with the plan and the JPA agreement. The membership you're aware of is in these different categories. There are 9 members. Basically, it's 2, 2, 2, and 3, the general public one being 3. That's pretty straightforward. There are certain people who are not eligible, or certain categories of people who are not eligible to be on the PAC. This includes the representatives of the local government agencies, the staff of the Habitat Plan permittees, the representatives of the wildlife agencies, the agency staff, and any consultants. The plan has some provisions with regard to the PAC, and the plan says that the Public Advisory Committee can provide input to the governing and implementation boards, the Technical Advisory Committee, and the staff on all aspects of the plan, and then emphasizes 6 enumerated topics. The committee may sunset at the end of the permit term. The permit term is 50 years, so I don't think any of you need to worry about that sunset situation. The topics, according to the plan, that the PAC could potentially provide advice on are fund expenditures for conservation, general application of conditions on covered activities, achieving the biological goals and objectives of the plan, the operation of reserves, monitoring and adaptive management, the technical information and expertise, and adherence to the plan commitments. I think quite a few of you mentioned one or more of these things as areas of your interest. The PAC duties specified in the resolution are a little bit different from what the plan says. Yes?
When you, on the 6 items, topics according to the plan, expenditure of funds for conservation, so we're only to comment on funds that apply to conservation, not general operating funds or anything else?
So let me differentiate between providing advice and any comments that you may have. I think the PAC as an entity certainly can always submit comments to the implementation board or the governing board with regard to any kinds of funding or operational expenses. But as envisioned by the plan, the focus would be the expenditure of funds for conservation. So I don't think you're precluded if you had some real genuine concerns about, say, administrative operational costs, but that's not really the focus of what the PAC is supposed to be focusing on. The implementation board also just looks at the budget. You will look at the budget, but it's the governing board that actually decides the budget. Does that help?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that distinction, so yeah, thanks.
Well, when the budget was presented, it was presented to us, and several points of discussion that were mentioned here. I then relayed that to during the public hearing on the budget, that this was what the PAC had discussed and had questions about. And so, you know, and it was all received, you know, and no one said, you know, you're out of order, you can't talk about, you know, spending day-to-day money.
That's why I brought it, because that's what we discussed was
Right.
the whole thing. But then it says here, just conservation, and I was kind of thrown off by that. So I understand the distinction you're saying. It's probably not a big deal. I just didn't know if that implied some kind of restriction, which you said it doesn't.
No, I don't believe it does. And the process that the chair described for the previous budget is basically the process you will also be following for the next upcoming budget. There will be a budget workshop. You will have the opportunity to provide input to the implementation board, and then it goes on to the governing board.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, wait. So the duties specified in the resolution are that you will host the annual public meeting. And the annual public meeting is something that is required by both the implementation agreement and by the federal regulations. So that is something that is a significant responsibility of the PAC. You also are to consider preliminary reports and recommendations presented by the staff. And then if you are requested to make specific recommendation, or not specific recommendations, but if you're requested to make recommendations on specific items, specific topics, specific issues by either the implementation board or the governing board, you certainly would be doing that.
Well, and a question that if in fact we, the committee, if we, in our infinite wisdom, decide that we want to make a comment about something, we can initiate the comment. Am I correct?
Yes, you can always initiate a comment. The PAC still retains the same rights any citizen has. So any citizen could make a comment at a public meeting. So on behalf of the PAC, the chair or some other designated person can make a comment at a public meeting.
Thank you.
So I have one more question. We do quarterly meetings. Does that count for an annual meeting, or are you talking about a separate annual meeting that's somehow different than what we're doing now?
No, one of your annual meetings, I believe it's the meeting in January. I might have to double check.
Well, they're all open to the public, so
Yeah.
I'm confused. Okay.
I understand that they're all open to the public, but there's a requirement that one be officially designated the annual meeting. And so my recollection is that the meeting in January February is officially designated the annual public meeting. So when that agenda is prepared and when the notice goes out for that, that will clearly state that this is the annual public meeting required by the implementation agreement and federal regulations, as opposed to, for example, this meeting, which is simply your regular quarterly meeting. So it's not that you're going to come to a separate meeting. It's just that that meeting's going to have, for lack of better description, a little more stature. That help?
But we get extra cookies or something that day, or but so okay, it's just a designation. We don't really do anything differently than what we normally do, or do we?
I think there will be kind of like an annual report at that
So we
meeting.
would receive the annual report at that time.
Probably not. No, I don't know what the distinction of the. It's something that Valerie and I are going to learn more about. What as will all of you learn what this annual meeting's all about.
Okay. No, that's
Yeah,
fine.
because the annual report, we in the beginning of the the creation of this agency, it's something that doesn't have to be done immediately, but at some point we have to do an annual, so we get a bit of a kind of a free period here, a free zone where we where the growing pains and et cetera, but yes, at some point there will be an annual report, not in February though, but there will be an annual report and we'll bring it to you, absolutely.
Okay.
I have to learn more about what this special meeting is and when we need to have it.
One quick question about the special meeting. Is it fixed that the February has to be that special meeting? Because we also have new members coming into the board during that February session. We have a new year. If we could move that to May, then we could probably get our hands on the report by that time. I'm sure it's going to go through the other agency parts, and so if we could do it in May, that would probably be more ideal. I know it's a little bit delayed, but could be advantageous for us to have more information, a little more time to process the information.
So the regulation or the rules and regulations that were adopted by the resolution doesn't specify when the annual meeting has to be. And so I may have misspoke when I said that it would be in February. We'll work that out. We've basically just been here a month ourselves, and so we're trying to nail down certain things. So we'll certainly take into account the comments that you've all made about when might be best for the annual meeting and what exactly will happen.
And it also may be something as simple as we elect a chair and a vice chair. And then that might be at that time.
Your first meeting was this past February, correct?
I just go when I get a notice from Angie.
Yes. So yes, I think
This is your third meeting, is my
Yes.
understanding.
so I do think you are correct about the chair and vice chair for February.
Back to you.
Thank you. So the resolution indicates that there are a variety of areas that the board could make requests of the PAC. And so what I have listed here are the types of requests the board could make, either board, the governing board or the implementation board. So they can ask you to comment on broad policy issues. They can ask you to comment on the key plan implementation strategies. They can ask you to comment on the proposed reserve system and how the assembly strategies and progress is going on that. Any amendments to the habitat plan, the budget, mitigation fee studies and the fees themselves, the annual report, and basically anything else that the implementation board says we would like your input on. So there's pretty much, I think, anything that you could possibly think of in relationship to this whole entity and to the plan are things that one or the other boards could request you to get more involved with. Now, there are some specifics in the resolution about PAC meetings. So the PAC meetings are required to comply with the Ralph M. Brown Act, which is in the government code, and I'll be talking about a little bit later some of the key aspects of the Ralph M. Brown Act. Your meetings are quarterly, the first Thursday of February, May, August, and November, here at 6 p.m. You need 5 members to constitute a quorum, and at least 5 votes for anything except to adjourn. As you noticed tonight with the minutes, you didn't have 5 votes, so you carry that over. You can continue a meeting if for some reason we had this meeting this evening and there was a lot going on and it got late and you didn't want to cut the meeting short and you didn't finish, you could continue the meeting to another point in time. And special meetings can be held if they're called either by the chair or by a majority of the board members. And that's consistent with provisions of the Brown Act as well. Yes?
Do we have 8 members?
You have 2, 4, 6, 9 members.
9. So do we have another vacancy?
No, it just, so you have 8 members, but 9 seats.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So we do have an opening in which category?
Agriculture. It's the Jennifer Shearer.
Okay, so then we're missing Dick, Oliver.
Is Dick stepped down?
No.
Okay.
No.
He's just
Okay.
absent.
Yeah, he's just
I'm
absent.
just trying to count noses.
Then
Okay.
One more.
Kyle Wolf. Okay, yes.
And Kyle represents agriculture.
Yes.
Right.
Good, thank you.
So, there's a chair, there's a vice chair. Each serves a 1-year term at the pleasure of the committee. The chair presides at the meeting, will sign minutes after they're approved. The vice chair basically acts in the chair's absence. And if for some reason both the chair and the vice chair were not able to be present, you would then select for the particular meeting a chair pro tem to preside. The PAC secretary is actually the executive officer of the Habitat Agency. He's designated in the resolution as the one who attends meetings and keeps minutes, although actually the clerk's office representative will actually be doing the detailed minutes. The secretary is also the custodian of all the books and papers and records. Now, because this is a new entity, when it started up, terms were staggered. Some people have 2-year terms, some people have 4-year terms. That was designed to get things up and running. Subsequently, all terms for all members of the committee will be 4-year terms. And you are allowed under this resolution to serve a maximum of 2 consecutive 4-year terms. It also states very specifically that partial terms of less than 4 years don't count towards the limitation, which means those of you who were appointed to a 2-year term actually conceivably could serve for 10 years. Yes?
How do we know what length of time we were appointed for? Because I don't believe I was ever told. Oh, so that's what that means. Good, okay. Should have asked. I thought that meant there were 4 members there.
Okay. All right. The resolution provides that if you have unexcused absences from any 3 consecutive meetings, that's an automatic resignation. It also provides that if you have unexcused absences from any 3 meetings in a 12-month period, that's an automatic resignation. However, it also says that excused absences are absences for personal illness or death of a family member, and family is fairly broadly defined, and that the implementation board can also determine if you had some other absence that was excused for good cause. So unless basically you are really derelict in your duties and don't show up and have no reason to not show up, you're probably not going to wind up with a problem in terms of resignation for unexcused absences. Now, vacancy. Because we do have a vacancy now, we wanted to discuss this. There's a variety of ways in which a vacancy can be created. Death or incapacity, resignation, loss of eligibility, removal, unexcused absence, as we just discussed, inability or refusal to perform your duties, or refusal or neglect to file the oath. When you got appointed, you all had to sign an oath and submit that to the clerk. So you've just had a resignation, so you have a vacancy, and the implementation board as a whole, or the chair of the implementation board, if the board authorizes, will then appoint a successor to the unexpired term. So that's why Ed was talking about people suggesting people who might be candidates, and then that information will go to the implementation board and the chair, and we'll see if the board as a whole wants to make the appointment, or if the implementation board will designate the chair and just leave it to the chair to make the appointment. There's no time period specified in the resolution with regard to when that appointment should be made, but since you only meet quarterly, I would think that there should be an appointment before your next meeting. So your responsibilities as members of the PAC are to prepare and come to the meetings, having read the agenda and any related materials, and to be courteous to the public and other committee members, so that, basically only one person speaks at a time, and you focus on the material before you, and you don't get into arguments with each other or the public. So now we're going to move on from the details of the PAC to some aspects of parliamentary procedure. And I want to stress that the main purpose of parliamentary procedure is to facilitate an orderly meeting. The presiding officer, in this case referred to as the chair, runs the meetings and basically keeps order, is really what it all boils down to.
Question.
Yes.
Was there any discussion or any thought on having a 3-minute, a 5-minute limit, 5-minute limit on speakers?
So that's something that's entirely up to the committee. That's very common at city council meetings, planning commission meetings. So that really is like a local or committee specific rule that you can make, and you can make it across the board for all of your meetings. You can make it as on a case-by-case sort of ad hoc basis. I mean, you don't have a lot of people here tonight, so if somebody spoke for 5 minutes as opposed to 3 minutes, it probably wouldn't matter. But if you had a room full of people, you might very well want to institute a 2 or 3 minute time limit. But that's something that is within the discretion of the committee.
Thank you.
So just some general basics of parliamentary procedure is that everyone is equal, even though there's a chair and a vice chair. When you're dealing with routine aspects of an item, you're all equal members. There has to be a quorum present and majority rules. There are a couple of instances where things require something other than a majority, but basically, typically, if things are moving forward, the majority rules. One issue at a time and one speaker at a time. That's just to avoid chaos. Each item is entitled to full and free discussion. So just because maybe somebody doesn't like a particular item doesn't mean you get to abort it or cut it short or not allow other people to speak on it. Respect the rights of the minority. There are very well maybe times when there's a majority view and there's a minority view, and the minority view has to have the opportunity to be expressed. And silence is regarded as consent. So if somebody doesn't like something, but they don't say anything, there's no way for anybody to know that you don't like something, so silence is considered to be going along with the majority. So just a sample proceeding, if you had an item coming before you, the chair would announce the item. There might be, typically, there would be a staff report and possibly a recommendation. You would then open it for public comment. And like I said, you would state the guidelines for public testimony if you had time limits, and then you would close the public comment or the hearing. Now, there are different types of motions in parliamentary procedure. There's a main motion, which introduces the business that's being considered. There are subsidiary motions, which change or affect how the main motion is handled. So if there was a motion made, and there was a second, and there was a motion on the floor, and somebody wanted to amend the motion or change it in some way, they would voice that amendment. If they were able to get a second, then you would vote on that amendment before you went back to the main motion. There are some things that are called privileged motions, and that's some types of urgent matters that come up and have to be dealt with right away. And then there are incidental motions, which tend primarily to be questions of procedure. My guess is that there's not going to be a lot of instances where you're going to need to get bogged down in this. And even if you aren't accustomed to being in the positions that you are, if you've been to any one of a number of city council meetings or planning commission meetings or other governmental type agency meetings, and you've seen how those meetings are conducted, you probably have some sense of parliamentary procedure, even if you don't consciously think of it in those terms. So main motions are basically motions to approve with conditions, or disapprove an item of business that comes before you. Take from the table means we're not going to deal with something, we're just going to put it aside. Sometimes there are situations, and you probably would not really encounter this, but there are situations where maybe early in the agenda there's a vote on an item, and then there's some other business that comes up later on, and somebody thinks, well, gee, now that we've had this discussion and we've progressed this far, I'd really like to go back and reconsider how I voted on the earlier item. You can do a reconsideration only at the same meeting that you already had that item on. If you have a meeting in August and then you think things over and you come back in November, you can't do a reconsideration. Then you have to move on to the next one, which is a rescind, repeal, or amend something that was previously dealt with. So then I have a list here of the subsidiary motions. I'm not going to go through all of these. The main ones that you would typically deal with would be amending or substituting. And the difference between an amendment and a substitution is, let's say somebody makes a motion and says, I'd like this to be done within 3 days. And somebody else says, well, gee, I'd like to say that it could be done within a week. You're still saying you want the thing to be done. It's just a question of the time. So the amendment would be to amend the amount of time that was involved in getting something done, as opposed to somebody saying, making a motion that they would like something to be done, and somebody else coming back with a substitute motion which says, no, I don't want the thing to be done. It's completely different. It's not just an issue of changing a small aspect of the motion. I don't think we need to go through the rest of them unless somebody really has a burning question about one of them. Then the privileged motions are, as I indicated before, more procedural types of things. So if you want to call for orders of the day, which has to do with how you're conducting business, or raise a question that's again something that's procedural, or say it's 9 o'clock and somebody says, I really want to make sure that we adjourn by 10. That's fix the time to adjourn. Those motions can just be made even though other business is going on. Same with recess, same with adjourn. And then there are these other incidental motions, which again, very rarely come up, but I just thought to be complete in terms of discussing parliamentary procedure, I would lay them out. So, taking action. Once a matter comes before you, someone other than the chair or the presiding officer will make a motion. The motion is going to be approved. The motion could be to approve with conditions. The motion could be to reject, disapprove, whatever. There needs to be a second to that motion. If there's no second, then it doesn't go forward and somebody else has an opportunity to make a motion. Once there's been a motion made and seconded, the presiding officer restates that motion clearly. And then, if the group wants to discuss it or debate it or what have you, that's when that discussion and so forth takes place. And that's when there might be some amendments or what have you. Typically, the person who made the motion is allowed to speak first, and the person who seconded the motion is also allowed to speak next, and then other people may comment or not comment. There's no requirement that everybody talk on every single motion. Some of you may have been to meetings where there'll be a motion made, there'll be a second, the maker will discuss it, the second will discuss it, and then they'll go down the dais and every single member will indicate, how they're going to vote and why they're going to vote and what they think of it. You don't have to do that. You can do that, but it's not certainly required that you do that. Somebody can make a motion, somebody can second it. They can both decide they don't need to discuss it, and everybody can just vote without any commentary whatsoever. If there's a lot of discussion back and forth, and if there are amendments and so forth, and it gets a little confusing, it is up to the presiding officer to restate the motion prior to a vote being taken. And then the vote is taken, and then the results of the vote get announced. Okay, now we're going to move on to the Brown Act. The Brown Act is also known as the California Open Meeting Law. It's in the government code. All governmental entities at the local government level adhere to the Brown Act. The provisions apply to what is defined in the law as legislative bodies. This group does not meet the requirements of legislative bodies as specified in the Brown Act, but the resolution that was adopted specifically says that you will comply with the Brown Act. So as a result, even though you are technically not a legislative body, you are subject to the Brown Act. What that essentially means is that your meetings must be open to the public. There is in the Brown Act a list of exceptions that allow closed sessions. The key exceptions for closed sessions are litigation situations, real estate negotiations, and labor negotiations. It's unlikely that there would ever be a closed session with this body. I can't say 100% that there would never be a closed session with this body, but because you do not have ultimate authority with regard to any litigation against the agency or any real estate negotiations, and there's only one employee, there's the likelihood of your having a closed session is extremely remote. The definition of a meeting under the Brown Act is critical. The definition basically is that there is a majority of members at the same time and place to discuss or deliberate on any matter within their subject matter jurisdiction. typically, for example, when this meeting is over, and let's say you had something substantive on the agenda this evening, you should not then adjourn from this meeting and all go to the local coffee shop and continue to discuss what was on the agenda here. You also are considered to be having a meeting if you use direct communication technology intermediaries, meaning, like a trusted aid, to develop a collective decision on some action to be taken. So if there's an item on the agenda and you start calling each other or emailing each other or faxing or having people go back and forth talk about the item and come up with your decision beforehand, that's illegal. You're supposed to make your decisions in the public setting such as this, based upon what's presented to you. And specifically, serial meetings are not allowed. And serial meetings are when person 1 talks to person 2, and then person 2 talks to person 3 and says, I talked to person number 1, and he or she is going to vote this way. And then person 3 talks to person 4 and says, I talked to so-and-so who talked to so-and-so, and they said such and such. And one of the things that sometimes becomes tricky, because I don't think most of you would engage in the discussion or the behavior that I just described, but what becomes trickier is if someone who, let's say, has a project that's coming before you and wants to get some sort of read on how you feel about it, and that project applicant or the project opponent comes and speaks to one person and then goes and speaks to another person and says, well, I met with so-and-so, and when I discussed this with so-and-so, they said such and such. And if you ever find yourself in that kind of situation, you basically just need to cut the people off and say, I don't want to know about your discussions with other committee members. Now, there are situations where a majority of you might wind up at the same function, and you don't have to worry about being in violation of the Brown Act. So, if you go to a conference on public agency issues and all of you are there, so let's say you're going to a Santa Clara Valley Water District Board meeting because they're talking about something that relates to the plan and you're interested, but you're going as a member of the public. You're not all going to go and then go off in a corner and discuss Habitat Agency business. You can all be at that conference, or you can all be at that open and public meeting. And the other one is the social or ceremonial occasion, which you can all go to and applaud the ribbon cutting or the groundbreaking or what have you. Now, more nitty-gritty is your agendas have to be posted at least 72 hours before the meeting, and the agendas have to be posted in a location that's accessible to the public. Basically, staff takes care of that, so you don't really need to worry about the mechanics of that. And the agendas have to briefly describe what the business is going to be, and if something's not on an agenda, you can't take action on it. What's really important for the PAC members to understand is if you want to have something on an agenda, you need to let the executive officer know sufficiently in advance so that it can get on the agenda. So you have meetings once a quarter. Don't wait till 3 days before your next meeting to say, I'd like this item to be on the agenda. If you want something to be on the agenda, make sure that the staff knows far enough in advance that you want the item to be on the agenda. Yes.
Where are they publicly noticed now, the meetings?
There's a board right outside this door where we post the agenda, and right outside of this door, and they're on the website.
Okay, but they don't go to each of the agencies that are responsible for, okay.
Is there a reason why the agendas aren't sent to the agencies?
Because we don't hold meetings at their locations. They're not posted there.
I would guess that most of the key agency personnel that are interested in this subject matter just basically look the agenda up online. The law hasn't caught up to technology,
Right.
so the law does not mention anything about online access. The original Brown Act goes back to pre-computer days and focused on the physical posting of the notice at the location. But the reality is and there are provisions, if somebody's really interested and they want to, they can sign up and pay to have stuff mailed to them. And that used to be very common 10, 20 years ago. But now, pretty much everybody looks things up online. So there are some exceptions to the 72-hour agenda requirement. But again, these exceptions are unlikely to apply to this committee because you're probably not going to be dealing with an emergency that affects public health or safety. And there's probably not something that's going to arise between the time that the agenda is posted and the time that you have your meeting. So again, basically, you have